Hello everyone and welcome back to another video at Leigh Junction. This is the February 2021 layout update video as well as a bit of a ballasting video, which I will get to a little bit later on. But first off, I have a couple of new arrivals to go over which you can see in front of you, as well as a few other changes which have happened to the layout since the last video. So, Bachmann 158 and the Colossus Rail Class 67. In the last video, I talked a bit about wanting to get a Class 67 for the Network Rail train. So I've gone ahead and been able to purchase one of these. Really pleased with it. I'm really glad I got it in the Colossus Rail Freight livery. It's really bright and vibrant, a bit different. I really love the contrast between the orange and the yellow. So yes, superb model from Hornby. I know they've been out for quite a few years, the new tooled ones anyway, but if you have one, you'll know that they are a very good model from Hornby. Now, the second purchase was one I was not planning on, but one day I was just on eBay and this 158 came up and it was an absolute bargain. I think the guy who was selling them, he wanted to focus on more sort of 80s stock and wanted to get rid of his new stuff. So he was selling it at a great price and it was in perfect condition. So I couldn't really say no. One of those spontaneous purchases, but really pleased with it. The livery, application, the undercarriage detail, the light features, the smoothness of the running is just amazing. It's fitted with the Bachmann 22-pin chip. I can't remember the exact name for it, but yes, very pleased with it. I'm thinking about doing a sort of close-up video of it, going over all the details, really showing it off, and doing a bit of an in-depth review, and also how to DCC fit one of these new ones. If you would like that, do comment that below, as that is something I'm wanting to do. Okay, so now on to the updates which have happened since the last video. So first off, it's this couple of Metcalf kits, the retaining wall and the railway bridge. Talked a bit about these in the last video, sort of was showing how I was starting to make these, but I've now finished both the kits. The retaining wall was one that I had to build and then fit in, but the bridge was much more of a trial and error, building it around the baseboard which the track fitted on. But yeah, it's now all glued in place and fitted in. I'm pleased with how it's come out, and I'll just go around the other side to show you the progress on the other side. So yeah, the Metcalf kit which I was doing, it's now all done on both sides. As I said, it was a very fiddly job to do. Mainly just sort of getting all the brickwork to look right on the inside was really hard, because obviously the piece of the track bed is on a bend, and this isn't designed to be made, this kit isn't designed to be done on a bend. But anyway, I think it looks okay. I'm pleased with it. So yes, and the iron girder bridge side bits I've glued into place. I am really pleased with them. I did the weathering a couple of weeks back now with some old Airfix enamel paints. So yeah, I think it's come out really well. Let me know in the comments if you think it looks good or if you have any ways to improve it. So yeah, this scene is really coming together. When I finally get around to buying that grass, which I'll hopefully do next week, it will all come together. Now the ballasting that I'm going to do in this video is actually the bit of ballast along the top of the bridge on those tracks there. So that's what we'll do later on at the end of the video. Also, you'll be able to see there's a little truck and a bogie in the little siding there. So very simply, all that I did was I took out the old piece of track which was there and fitted in a point and the extra little bit of track there. So basically I wanted another little piece of interest, and well, actually the main cause of this was that the Metcalf kit, I couldn't do this tunnel end at a corner, I had to do it flat on. So that means I had this weird triangle extra bit. So I thought, okay, let's put a point in here and make it sort of an old siding, so when I get around to the weathering, I'll weather it all down and make it look sort of abandoned, and maybe leave that track in there, I don't know, but it adds another piece of interest and I'm quite pleased with how it looks at the moment. And then also I filled it all in with the Mod Rock scenery stuff and filled it in by the retaining wall as well. So the last little update on this part of the video is I fitted that corner back in. The track work, which was the issue, which was why I had to take the old tunnel part out in the first place. I fixed the track work, had to change it around a little bit, change the track plan, but it all works now. which is all that matters, which is good. And I changed the tunnel port. It was a plastic one from somewhere, I can't remember where, but I used a spare Hornby one I had, cut off the corner so it would fit in that space. But now, yeah, that matches all the other two. And yeah, I'm pleased with it. Obviously it'll look good when it's all properly put in with weathering and grass and all of that when I get around to that. Okay then, so it's now the following day. I ran out of time to film this footage yesterday, so we're doing it today. Now, as you would have already have seen, you can see that I have started the ballasting already. So the section underneath the bridge here, I've already ballasted, and the points just along the back here as well. Now, I had to ballast all of this before I started on the bridge, especially the end bit there with the Metcalf kit, because trying to fit the kit in and then ballast it all with the kit already fitted, it would have been a nightmare, so I had to ballast it beforehand. And then the second bit of ballasting that I did was just the other week along the back here on the main lines. For this video, we're going to be ballasting just from where I finished here to the end of the bridge here. Now, this is the only part of the layout I've started ballasting on, simply because this is the part of the layout which I'm comfortable with, 100% set in stone with the track plan. This area of the layout isn't changing. But on the other side, I'm still not sure it is the right track plan, and I might be having some other changes, so I'm just going to leave that for now and focus on this half of the layout. And if I'm honest, sometimes it's easier just to focus on smaller parts so you can really get as much detail and do it as best as you can on smaller bits instead of trying to look at the whole picture and doing it all in one. Right then, so what have we got in front of us? So everyone likes to do their ballasting differently. I have tried lots of different techniques on my last layout. I used a different technique to what I'm using now, and also the type of ballast. The thing is, everyone likes their ballast differently. There are loads of different colours and different sizes which the grain comes in. So yeah, at the end of the day, it does all come down to personal preference. So what you're going to need is PVA glue, water, and a bit of fairy liquid for the actual gluing of the ballast. The ballast I'm going to use is Woodland Scenic's Fine Ballast, Grey Blend, and Gauge Master Granite Ballast. Okay, so here we have the ballast. We've got the Woodland Scenic's Fine Grey Ballast and the Gauge Master Grey Granite Ballast. Now, for me personally, initially I found the Woodland Scenic stuff too fine, and I found the Gauge Master stuff too coarse. And again with the colour, I found the Woodland Scenic stuff too light and the Gauge Master stuff too dark. So in my head, the obvious thing was to do, right, let's mix them together. And actually created this blend, which I really liked. I haven't seen many people sort of mixing different grades of ballast, but you find on railways that ballast does vary a lot due to weathering, different conditions which the track is in, and also bits get replaced a lot of the time as well. So although it's a fairly 50-50 mix, you'll find across the layout it is quite varied, which in some ways is more realistic. Okay, so before you actually start ballasting, there's a couple things that need to be done to actually prepare the track before we can ballast. So if you have underlay on your track, you will need to make sure you just get a knife, a scalpel, whatever, and very simply go around the edge of the track and cut your cork or whatever your underlay is off as close to the sleepers as you can. This just means that when you put the ballast, lay the ballast on the track, it falls neatly just to the side of the sleepers and makes a nice shoulder, which is what you want. Okay, so after you've trimmed down the cork, so you can see now the cork is nice and flush with the edge of the sleepers, which is what you want. If you're using flexi track or, well, I don't know, any other type of track, you'll find that as the tracks come together like here, you'll need to remove some sleepers because I'll just take it closer. You can see that the actual joining of the two rails aren't completely next to each other. That's because this is on a bend, and that's what you end up having. So you're going to want to fill these all in with spare sleepers, otherwise it's going to look a bit odd. So what I do is I just take spare sleepers. I'm sure you'll have some around the layout. I have loads, and very simply use the scalpel to cut the little connecting bits off which connect them to the rails, so it just means that it's flat for the rails to sit on, and then also the side bits if there's any extra. So for example on this one you've got little bits on the edge here which can get in the way, so I just snip them off so it's nice and flat, and then very simply just slot those. You can glue them if you want, but once it's all ballasted you won't know the difference. I've got a couple other here which I've trimmed down, and then just fit them so they look right. Make sure the spacing is as close as you can get it. So there you go, and when it's all ballasted you won't know the difference. I mean, it's hard to tell the difference now. So I'm now going to go across and do that across all these parts of the track, fill in the sleepers where they're needed and trim back the cork, and then we can get on with the ballasting. Okay, so now all the tracks are prepared. I filled in all the extra sleepers where they're needed and got rid of all that extra cork. Now the main implement you're going to need when ballasting is one of these hoppers. You can get them from most manufacturers, I think. Very simple little tool. It's just a plastic box with little slits on the bottom, which is where the rails fit in like so, and then you just pop the ballast in there, and then it can just fall through those cracks onto the track. So get yourself like a little pot to pop your ballast in. This is the stuff all mixed up. Just very simply pour it into the hopper and just drag it along the track. I always sort of wriggle it as it's moving along, give it a shake just to make sure it does actually fit in all those gaps. There we go. Now for the somewhat possibly more tricky step to ballasting is getting all the ballast to sit where you actually want it to go. So one of the best techniques I learned is if you just get a knife or a metal rod or type. The idea is you're wanting to get all the ballast to just fit neatly in between the sleepers, not actually on the sleepers themselves, and look good, which is what I'm trying to get right. As you can see on the track down here, most of the ballast is actually off the sleepers, which is what you want. So yes, the good technique, simply get a knife and just tap it on the track like so. And you should find, it's a funny angle because of the bridge size, but you should find that the ballast just neatly falls into all the gaps. And it's starting to look good. Now, obviously here we've got a little bit of a problem where the ballast is gone over. This is because the sleepers are slightly lower because we had to take off the little clips, but that is not a problem. I'm just going to get, because there's the little excess ballast on here as well, so I'm going to get a paintbrush and just very gently drag the ballast along the rails. Sometimes for the side of the rails, I just find if I get my finger and push against the edge of the rail so my finger is only just touching the sleepers, it works quite well to push it all off. But it can be quite a fiddly thing, and sort of once you've got your methods right, it tends to work quite well, but it can be quite tedious, but it's definitely worth it when you get it right. There we go. That is pretty much perfect. There's no ballast on the rails. There's a little bit of excess here, but don't worry about that. I shall get that off. That's where it's sitting on the previously glued bits of the ballast. So I shall now move on and get right to the gluing. once I've laid all the ballast down. Something I forgot to mention was track detailing. Now, I don't have many things in the way of sort of stuff to detail the track at the moment, but sort of a key thing to remember is stuff that if you're going to want to put stuff on the track, it's important to get that all fitted before you put all the ballast down. So I forgot to add these, but I've just put them in, and these are some catch bit drain things from Scale Model Scenery, which I fitted several down on this level. As you can see, you've got 3 there, and I just glued 1 in place there and 1 just there. These are just little things, add another little piece of interest, and it's just important to do them before you stick all the ballast down. Also, things like rails, always looks good to put a couple of spare rails sort of in between the tracks. That's quite realistic. I've got a couple under the bridge there as well, which you can see. So yeah, just make sure these sort of things are all fitted down first. Okay, so now all the ballast is laid down. As you can see, it's all where it wants to be, and all of this section is now done. Now, before we actually can put the glue down, one of the most important things to do is to get yourself a squeeze bottle. So essentially what you want to do here is very simply just spray the track with a layer of water, just so that the ballast is already quite wet before you put the glue down. Because you'll find that if you try glue while the ballast is dry, it won't properly soak in and it will pick up bits of the ballast. It becomes very fiddly. So get yourself a bottle and just spray it very quickly with some water. Okay, so I've now completely sprayed all of the ballast on this section. It's now nice and wet. You don't want to absolutely drench it, because obviously it's electrics, but just a good covering so that when the glue is applied, it will already be wet so it can soak in as it should do. So obviously, first off, what you're going to want is PVA glue. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, just basic PVA. Put a good amount of that in your bowl. I usually do about 50-50 mix, maybe a bit more water if I can, because you don't want it really thick, but obviously you want enough glue in there so it's actually going to stick. And then the last ingredient is just a drop or 2 of fairy liquid. You really don't need loads, just like 1 or 2 drops. It's just to help break the surface tension. Then just a side note with the gluing, if you have too much glue, it won't penetrate the ballast, and if you have too much water, it's just going to run everywhere. So try get a good even mix of the two. Right, so now you've got all your mixture ready, it's now time to apply it to the ballast. Now, some people use syringes, but I personally find that with a syringe, as you're putting the ballast on, it's hard to get I find the glue comes out a bit too quick, and then it pushes the ballast everywhere and it's a nightmare. So what I find easier is to use a pipette. This was the only pipette we had in our household, but you can get them really cheap off Amazon or eBay, probably like less than £1. And yeah, I've just found these the most effective. And yeah, you want to make sure you give all the ballast a really thorough covering. You want to make sure you don't miss any bits, because sort of a minute after it's soaked in, it's hard to tell where you've actually glued. And once it's all dried, you don't want to have lots of loose bits. So just be really thorough. I do sections at a time just so I don't lose my place. So for example, here I'm only going to go up to that little drain on the track. And then sort of in my head, I know that bit's done, if that makes sense. So sort of do it either side of the rails. And then in the middle, obviously, just make sure it has a really good covering all over. Okay, I'm now going to go over and glue down all the remaining ballast. I won't show you all of it, otherwise we'll be here for a while, and I'll be back in the next day or two to make sure it's all dried down. Okay, so it's now been about 3 or 4 days since I glued it all down. I got a bit busy, so wasn't able to film it sooner, but it has had more than enough time to dry now. A good 24 hours to 30 hours, and it will be completely dry. It's good to not run the trains on it until it is actually completely dry, although it can be tempting. It's good to wait until it is fully dry. And then there's a couple things just to do after you have glued it all down. Is first of all, you want to hoover, give it a good hoover up any excess ballast. Hopefully, if you've done the gluing well, you won't have to hoover up much at all, and nothing will be wasted. The second thing you're going to want to do is give your track a really good clean, whether that's with different chemicals you use or just the standard track rubber, which is what I use. You want to make sure that you give the track a really good clean, because quite frankly, well, I find if I try to run a train after I've glued ballast down, it doesn't run at all because the track is all covered in PVA glue residue. Even though you can't see it, it's there. So yeah, give it a good clean, and then everything should all run nice and smoothly. Okay, so now just another thing. As I talked about this point earlier, I didn't have to worry about not gluing certain bits of it, because obviously it's not a functioning point, but I did just solder the right hand blade to the right hand point blade to the track, just to ensure that there is going to be no breakage in the circuit, because sometimes you find that depending if you have frogs on your points, the glue residue just gets in between them, and then the point blades won't conduct electricity anymore. So yeah, I just soldered it to make sure it would the current would stay. And then another thing is when I ballasted the little siding there, I added in some darker brown ballast to give the appearance that it's a slightly more abandoned siding, which is what I was going for. But obviously when it comes to weathering and adding all the finer details, I can really enhance that, but just that subtle change in the ballast helps. And then another thing is, with that point, I took out the other point blade. I know it looks a little bit different originally when I first took the second point blade out. It looked quite weird and I wasn't sure if I liked it, but it's definitely grown on me. It looks quite different. And yeah, another piece of interest, looks interesting. Let me know down in the comments if you like it, or if you would have kept it that way or done something different. Okay, I shall now bring this video to an end. I know it's been quite a long video, but I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've possibly learnt something, seen how I've liked to do my ballasting. As I said at the beginning, it's all down to personal preference. Everyone likes to do it differently. But yeah, I hope you have enjoyed it. And I think I'm going to try do a YouTube video sort of once a month on the YouTube channel itself, because by the time a month has gone by, a good amount of content is ready to be made. Whereas on Instagram, I post more regularly, just on smaller updates, which is fine. But for YouTube, I think I'll try to sort of do a monthly update. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video.